Now we begin with Story 1, A Day in the Life of a Roman King. The city is not yet awake. Before the cock crows, before the bakers knead their dough, before the scent of wet clay and olive oil rises in the air, there is stillness. And in that stillness, within the Domus Regia, the King of Rome stirs. Not the emperors you know, not the marble-bust autocrats of Caesar's lineage, but the kings, those rare few who ruled Rome when it was still learning to walk. Before the Republic, before the Senate declared itself eternal, there were 7 kings, or so the story goes. This is not the story of Romulus, the mythical founder, nor of Tarquin the Proud, whose downfall led to the Republic. No, today we follow a lesser-known figure, Tullus Hostilius, the 3rd king of Rome, a man overshadowed by myth and memory, but one who, in the quiet gray hours before dawn, began each day like any other Roman, bound by ritual, duty, and the unrelenting pressure of legacy. The King's Awakening. Tullus rises not by choice, but by schedule. He is, in many ways, more servant than sovereign, tied to Rome's sacred rituals as tightly as the lowest pontifex. His day begins in the atrium of his residence, where the lararium, the household shrine, awaits. Here, he murmurs quiet invocations to the Lares and Penates, gods of the home and hearth. A small flame is lit. He uses flint not out of necessity but tradition. The flame is offered a pinch of spelt and a droplet of oil, not enough to be grand, just enough to be seen by the gods. This act is performed not with pomp, but with the quiet boredom of someone who's done it every morning for decades. The gown of office. His attendants dress him slowly. The garments of a king are not for comfort. The toga, pretexted a white with a purple border, is layered, pleated, and pinned with care. Each fold is symbolic. Each thread, supposedly, carries the memory of Rome's founding. As the toga falls across his shoulder, the king sighs. He feels the familiar itch behind the neck where the wool rests too tightly. He does not scratch. That would be unkingly. His sandals are strapped next. The leather is rough. Softness is for Greeks. The palace kitchen and morning provisions. The kitchen of a Roman king is not lavish. A hearth fire smolders as servants begin to grind grain for pools, a kind of porridge made from emmer wheat. The food is intentionally bland. Salt, if available, is a luxury. Tullus Hostilius eats without speaking. He eats alone, a habit born from caution. Even in this early kingdom, assassination is a known tactic, so food tasters hover. One eats before him always. He is not hungry, but it is expected that a man of his station be nourished. What does hunger matter when duty is on the horizon? Administration in the Regia. With the sun cresting over the hills, the king moves to the Regia, the king's house, but also Rome's early civic hub. It is not a palace as we think of it. It is simple. A few chambers, some documents, a wooden chair with a slight backrest. There are no legions here, no grand councils, just scribes with wax tablets and the soft scratching of styluses against their surfaces. He hears disputes, land boundaries, theft accusations, cattle gone missing. The law is not codified. Tullus must invoke mos maiorum, the custom of the ancestors. These decisions are less about justice and more about precedent. He is tired of it already. But this is the king's duty, to be the living embodiment of tradition, even when no one agrees on what the tradition actually was. The audience of the nobles. Around the 5th hour, nobles of the Curia enter the chamber. These are not senators, not yet, but they are powerful, heads of clans. They speak slowly and deliberately, often repeating themselves. It is not for emphasis, but because they value formality more than efficiency. One noble accuses another of using too many slaves to draw water from the public fountain. Another is concerned that the omens read before his son's wedding were improperly interpreted. Tullus listens. He responds only when necessary. He is not a tyrant, he is a mirror. Inspections and omens. Before noon, Tullus leaves the Regia and ascends the Palatine Hill, walking toward the augurs. Today, they must take the auspices. A new temple is planned. No work can begin without the birds. Augurs carry curved staffs lidus and mark out sacred spaces in the sky. They watch birds, the direction they fly, the number, their behavior. It is a tedious process. Tullus watches in silence as a crow lands, pecks the earth twice, and flies east. The augur frowns. Tullus says nothing. He will wait another hour if needed. The gods are never rushed. A brief rest. In the heat of midday, the king returns to his quarters. For a moment, he is just a man. He removes the toga, lies down on a thin mat. He does not sleep. Kings do not nap, but he closes his eyes. The sounds of Rome filter in. Merchants calling, dogs barking, carts creaking over stone. It is the hum of a city that does not yet know what it will become. The afternoon gathering. Later he hosts a convivium, a gathering of trusted advisors, scholars, priests, not for entertainment, for planning. Rome is expanding. Conflict with Alba Longa looms. Tullus, known for his military fervor, listens as his advisors debate alliances, troop movements, and diplomatic maneuvers. But even as war is whispered, Tullus is thinking of the Sacra Publica, the public religious rites that must precede any declaration of hostility. The gods must be obeyed. Before the sword comes the offering. Dusk and the final rituals. As dusk settles, the king returns to the Laurarium. He lights another flame. He gives thanks. He mutters a prayer that no one else hears. A servant brings a cup of watered wine. He does not drink it all. The day is ending, but tomorrow will look the same. And as Tullus stares into the flickering flame, one wonders, did he ever resent the throne? Or did he become the ritual itself, shaped not by power but by repetition? The flickering flame has long since died. Morning has passed, and the slow, sacred inertia of Roman kingship begins its second act. For Tullus Hostilius, the third king of Rome, the afternoon is not rested his performance. Not in the theatrical sense, but in the quiet repetition of bureaucratic movements, public rituals, and ceremonial duty. This is how power maintained itself in early Rome, not through grand speeches or epic battles, though those came later, but through endless, seemingly dull repetition. Rome's slow expansion. By the middle of Tullus' reign, Rome is no longer a village. It is becoming a city, but barely. It stretches outward in fits, swelling at the edges like dough left too long in the sun. And yet it is not yet the Rome of empire. It has no paved roads, no aqueducts, no stone colosseums or gilded statues. It has mud brick buildings, timber beams, and public fountains chiseled roughly from tufa. The smell of dung mixes with incense. The streets are narrow and uneven, and every corner of the growing settlement whispers the same question: can this city endure? Tullus thinks of this often, though he would never admit it. The rituals of authority. After his midday rest, Tullus resumes his obligations. First among them, his presence at the Curia Hostilia, the meeting place for Rome's early advisory councils. Though not the Senate as it would later be formalized, it is the ancestor to it, a gathering of elders and clan leaders who argue not for democracy, but for the preservation of ancient customs. Each man wears a tunic with purple stripes, and each man believes himself to be the inheritor of divine wisdom. The arguments are slow, circular, and ceremonial. Today, the topic is grain storage. Tomorrow, it will be drainage. Nothing ever concludes. That in itself is the point. Tullus listens. He rarely interrupts. His strength is in appearing eternal, not in appearing correct. This is the power of ritual. The case of the boundary stone. One of the most mundane yet fiercely contested duties of the king is the adjudication of boundary disputes. Rome is still forming, and its agricultural plots, known as Ager Publicus, are constantly argued over. The fields are not marked by fences, but by sacred stones termini which represent both physical borders and the presence of divine law. Today, a landowner claims his neighbor moved a boundary stone in the dead of night. Tullus listens as both men plead their case. Witnesses are brought, soil samples examined, a clay tablet is produced, inscribed with the lineage of ownership. Eventually, the king calls for a ritualist, a official priest, to inspect the scene. The judgment is postponed. This is not a failure. This is how order is sustained, not with finality but with process. The official priests and the gods of treaty. Tullus was famously more militaristic than his predecessors, but even he could not escape the long shadow of official law. Before war could be declared, a detailed and ceremonial process had to be followed, one rooted in sacred tradition and almost absurd slowness. Today, he attends the recitation of this process, not because war is imminent, but because it is his duty to remember. The official priest speaks in a dry voice. If I demand with due and holy right that those men be given up to me, then may the gods favor our cause. The king repeats the sacred words, not because he believes they will summon divine justice, but because to omit them would unravel the legitimacy of war itself. This is how Rome maintained its illusion of righteousness. Even conquest needed a bureaucratic mask. The tedium of justice. Afternoon brings more petitions, some petty, some severe. A baker accuses a soldier of stealing flour. A freedman insists that his former master reneged on a manumission agreement. A merchant from Etruria demands repayment for an order of amphorae left unclaimed at the river port. Each case is recorded on wax tablets, and sometimes, if deemed significant, on linen books precursors to Rome's annals. The process is deliberate. Every dispute is filtered through layers of oral testimony, divine consultation, and social standing. Justice in early Rome was not blind. It was heavily biased by class, tribe, and reputation. Tullus knows this, but he also knows that to change it would be to upend the gods themselves. The archive room. Later in the day, the king visits one of Rome's earliest record rooms, a space barely larger than a granary, where scrolls and tablets are kept in rows of clay jars. There are no librarians, no indexes, just scribes who remember where things are. He asks for the Treaty of Alba, the formal agreement signed years prior with Rome's neighboring city. It is retrieved. The reed scroll is brittle, the ink faded. He reads it silently, tracing the characters, many of which are borrowed from the Etruscans. It is less a treaty than a poem, full of metaphor, sacred oaths, and conditions that no longer make sense. Still, he reads every line, not because he needs to, but because to forget this treaty is to risk divine wrath. Rome's memory is stored here, not in marble, but in the minds of tired men with styluses. The unremarkable supper. As the sun lowers, Tullus joins a private meal with trusted advisors. It is not a banquet. There are no liars, no dancers. There is boiled cabbage, lentils, a bit of smoked fish, a cup of sour wine watered down, bread dipped in olive oil thick with sediment. They speak little. There is nothing left to say. The day's rituals have all been performed, the gods acknowledged, the land judged, the records preserved. This is not a time of entertainment. It is a time of digesting order. The king's loneliness. Later, as the city winds down and the fires dim, Tullus walks the corridors of the Regia alone. There are no heirs in sight. No marble halls, no legends yet written. He pauses in front of a bronze mirror, polished but imperfect. In it, he sees the faint lines under his eyes, the deep furrow above his brow. He sees a man shaped by expectation, not ambition. A king, yes, but one whose daily power lies not in commands but in consistency, in not changing the routine, in always showing up. Is that what true leadership is? Or is it a slow surrender of the self? the sky above Rome. As night fully falls, Tullus steps out to the small courtyard and looks at the stars. There are no astrologers here, no predictions, just silence and breath. The sky over Rome is wide, dark, and full of unknowns. He wonders how much longer this tiny city on the Tiber will survive, if his name will be remembered, if his rituals meant anything. But he does not speak, the gods are listening. And besides, tomorrow he will repeat it all again. Was this kingship? Or was it simply endurance dressed as majesty? The city sleeps. The torchlight along the Via Sacra flickers in the windless night. Somewhere, a dog barks once and then quiets. The river Tiber moves without urgency, its surface silver under the moonlight. And inside the Regia, Tullus Hostilius, Rome's third king, sits alone, preparing for a ceremony that will seal both divine fate and political future. This is the ending of his day, but not a simple one. For in Rome, nightfall brings not stillness, but the culmination of ritual, reflection, and the silent mechanics of legacy. What comes after power? What remains when a man shaped by routine is no longer needed? The diminishing crown. Unlike emperors of later Rome, kings did not wear crowns. The regalia of Tullus Hostilius was modest, a purple-bordered toga, a staff of office, and when in full ritual, a ceremonial curule chair. But even these emblems meant little without the approval of the gods. Tonight, Tullus feels the weight of that invisible crown, heavier than armor. The people whisper of omens. A plague has broken out on the northern fringe of the city. The augurs report erratic patterns in the birds. Livestock have been born with deformities. The Salian priests, guardians of sacred shields said to fall from heaven, murmur that the ancile felt heavier this morning. All of these signs converge toward one question. Has the king angered the gods? The forgotten disease. The sickness spreading through Rome is unremarkable by modern standards, but in a world without antiseptics or understanding of germs, it is terrifying. The symptoms are slow: fever, swelling, weakness in the limbs. Tullus, a man of war and will, had previously mocked religious excess. Earlier in his reign, he neglected ritual sacrifices, focusing instead on military expansion. He won victories defeating Alba Longa, absorbing it into Roman territory. But his rejection of piety had been noted by the pontifices and the commoners alike. Now, as bodies are quietly burned at night and citizens avoid the forum, eyes turn to him. And Tullus begins to feel something he has rarely admitted before. Fear, seeking the sacred. On the eve of a new moon, the king visits the Numa temple, dedicated to Rome's second king, Numa Pompilius. Numa was everything Tullus was not: peaceful, priestly, a man said to commune with the goddess Egeria herself. In contrast, Tullus is remembered as the militant sovereign, the king of war. Now he enters Numa's temple in silence, kneeling before a marble plaque, its inscription barely legible. He who neglects the rites shall awaken the wrath of heaven. He places his hand on the cold stone. He whispers an apology. The marble does not answer. The lightning controversy. In later Roman mythology, it is said that Tullus Hostilius was killed by a bolt of lightning, sent by Jupiter himself as punishment for performing sacred rites incorrectly. Modern historians doubt this. Lightning is a powerful metaphor, a divine interruption, but what matters is that this was believed. According to the story, Tullus attempted to conduct the Sacra Publica, a rare state ritual reserved for deep calamity. These rites were old, complex, and required strict observance. Even a mispronounced word, it was said, could undo the blessing. Tullus, in his pride, chose to perform them personally without full consultation of the priests. And the gods, it is said, responded. The house shook. The sky split. The king's chambers were found in ashes. But what likely happened? Historically, we cannot confirm such divine punishment. What we can say is this: Tullus disappears from the records abruptly. His reign ends with no formal succession ceremony. The next king, Ancus Marcius, a relative of Numa, brings the city back into religious alignment. The shift is not subtle. Public rituals increase. Temples are restored. Priests gain more authority. It is as if Rome collectively decided that its third king had erred too far from the sacred, and now course correction was necessary. Whether struck by lightning or undone by politics, Tullus' fall is interpreted through religion, not reason. And that, too, is part of the boring machinery of history, belief shaping reality. What the people remember. In the markets, the bakers whisper that Tullus summoned demons, that he invited the gods' wrath with each military parade, that he mocked the rites and paid the price. Fishermen tell their son that the river changed course the night he died. A potter swears he saw a black owl on his rooftop for 3 nights before the thunder came. None of these stories are verifiable, but they survive. And in Rome, survival of story becomes survival of fact. Tullus' name remains etched in the Fasti Capitolini, the official list of Rome's kings. But beyond the list, he becomes a cautionary tale. The irony of legacy. Tullus Hostilius expanded Rome's territory, unified local tribes, and paved the way for urban growth. Yet he is remembered primarily as the king struck by lightning, the one who angered the gods, the example of what happens when ritual is neglected. It is the final act, not the sum total, that defines him in collective memory. And isn't that true of so many? His final day, as imagined. There is no written account of Tullus' final hours, but we can imagine it based on tradition and ritual. He rises early, as always. He performs the flame offering, but this time, his hand shakes. He eats pools in silence, but does not finish it. He meets with priests, but listens more than speaks. He opens the sacred scrolls, rereads the old treaties, places his seal on a new one. He visits the augurs. He watches the birds fly west. He does not speak. That evening, he prepares the great rite. The sky is clear. The wind is still. He stands alone, toga heavy on his shoulders, reciting words learned too late. And then, a sound, a flash, a story that would outlive him. Rome marches on. The city does not pause for grief. New rulers rise. Temples multiply. Streets are paved, senators elected, wars declared. But every generation tells the story of the king who forgot the gods. A warning wrapped in flame. And so, in the dull archives of early Roman kingship, where dates and rituals blur, Tullus remains vivid not for his life, but for his end. A final reflection. You've now seen a full day quiet, repetitive, ceremonial, burdened. A day that ends not with triumph, but with the fragile silence between devotion and destruction. The boring history of Rome reminds us. Sometimes the most enduring impact a leader leaves is in how they fell. Story 2. The account ledger of a Han Dynasty tax collector. The sun has not yet broken over the horizon when Li Wei, a mid-level tax collector in the Han Dynasty, wakes to the soft rustling of silk robes and the distant hum of mourning drums. It is 97 BCE, the 6th year of Emperor Wu's Taishi era, and the vast empire stretches from the shores of the East China Sea to the deserts beyond the Yellow River. But in the heart of a provincial town in the Jizhu Commandery, the world is smaller, quieter, and ruled not by armies or emperors, but by ink, brush, and bamboo slips. This is not the glamorous side of empire. This is not the story of generals or poets. This is the story of administration of endless scrolls, dry ink wells, and counting sacks of millet until the sun goes down. This is a day in the life of a hand tax official. Bureaucracy before breakfast. Li Wei lives modestly in a brick-walled residence adjacent to the local ting, the government office where administrative tasks are carried out. His quarters are sparsely furnished. A low wooden bed, a folding screen with faded calligraphy, and a table cluttered with brushes, inkstones, and wooden seals. Before eating, he lights a stick of incense and bows before a small ancestral shrine on his eastern wall. He does not pray for wealth or success. He prays, as he does every morning, for accurate records, compliant peasants, and quiet auditors from Chang'an. Breakfast and the clerk's routine. His breakfast is simple: a bowl of millet porridge, a few slices of dried radish, and a cup of warm water. Luxury is for higher officials. Here, comfort lies in predictability. After breakfast, he dresses in his official robes, made of hemp and dyed in dull gray-blue, the color assigned to civil servants of his rank. His wooden tally token, carved with the emperor's characters, hangs from his belt. It identifies him as a certified counter of taxes, a Shuji Yuan in the imperial hierarchy. The moment he steps into the outer courtyard, he is met with the faces of 3 assistants: a junior scribe named Bao, a runner named Jin, and an elderly ledger keeper who only ever answers to the name Grandfather Liu. The tools of the trade. The ting is not grand. It is a 2-room structure with heavy wooden beams and slatted windows. The northern wall is lined with bamboo slips tied together with hemp string records of tax receipts, land plots, population counts, and state requisitions. In the corner, a heavy bronze inkstone rests on a carved pedestal. Water is ladled into it carefully, ground with ink sticks made from soot and glue. Li Wei prepares his brush with measured precision. The brush, not the sword, is the tool that sustains the empire. Every record must be perfect. Every stroke must follow the standardized script, clerical script, or lishu, with its wide, flat strokes and squared forms. It is elegant in its tedium. The scroll of villages. Today's primary task is the inspection of the land tax scroll, known formally as the Tianfu Si. This document lists the tax obligations of every household in the region, mostly farmers, some artisans, a few merchants. Each line includes name of head of household, number of acres of land owned, estimated yield in millet, wheat, or rice, number of livestock, if any, tax rate assigned, based on land fertility and imperial decrees. It is a long, dull list. But to Li Wei, it is the heartbeat of the state. The visit from the village head. Mid-morning brings a knock. The lezhang, or village head, arrives in person. He is a stocky man named Zhao Ming, with rough hands and a nervous energy. He brings news. One family has failed to deliver their grain quota. Another has added 2 oxen without declaration. Li Wei nods, expression unreadable. He does not accuse. He does not threaten. He simply notes the changes and quietly adjusts the tax figures. A state is not maintained by force alone. It is maintained by record-keeping, calculation, and an unspoken agreement. You give the state its due, and the state, in turn, does not disturb you. The counting house. In a separate room, sacks of tax grain, mostly millet, are being counted and registered. Each sack is weighed on a balanced scale with bronze counterweights. Each weight is marked with the seal of the local administrator. Li Wei watches as the scribes mark down the totals. One sack is underweight by 800 grams. It is not significant, but it is recorded. A note is made. The grain will be sent via tribute boats downriver next week, where it will join the stores destined for Chang'an. No ceremony, no celebration. Just dust, ink, and silence. The audit ledger. After lunch, stale dumplings and boiled cabbage, Li Wei returns to his audit ledger. This is his most sensitive document, where corrections, Discrepancies and suspected fraud are recorded in tiny, coded characters. Line 88. Zhang family reported 5 mu but mapping shows 6. Line 143. Merchant Yuan declared 1 apprentice, 3 found. Line 277. Widow Zhao exempted due to flood loss, verify in winter. Each note is made with care. Errors are not merely clerical, they are legal liabilities. Once a month, a traveling auditor arrives from the prefecture capital. Any unexplained variation could result in demotion, fines, or even corporal punishment. This fear, more than loyalty, keeps the tax system running. Education and surveillance. In the afternoon, Li Wei visits a village school not to inspect the students, but to check if the grain stipend promised to the teacher has been delivered. The school is a single room, open to the wind. Children recite verses from the classic of filial piety, their voices flat and uninterested. The teacher, a thin man with ink-stained sleeves, bows and hands, Li Wei a bamboo receipt. It confirms he received 1 sack of grain and 2 bolts of cloth. Li Wei inspects the seals. They match. He does not linger. Surveillance in the Han bureaucracy is quiet, constant, and deeply boring. And yet it is effective. Sunset and tired eyes. By sundown, the courtyard is quieter. Assistants sweep the floors. Jin feeds the guard dog. Grandfather Liu nods off beside the ledgers. Li Wei sits at his desk, brush in hand, copying the day's entries into a master roll. His wrist aches. His back tightens, but he does not stop. Each entry feeds into a larger system. The commandery's reports are bundled and sent to the inspector of the province, whose office distills them into summaries that travel to Chang'an, where they will be used to adjust harvest predictions, state expenditures, and the emperor's decrees. Li Wei is a tiny cog, but if he errs, the machine lurches. And so he continues to write. Nightfall and reflection. After supper, Li Wei returns to his quarters. He stares at the small bronze mirror near his bed, lit only by a lantern. He wonders if the emperor knows his name. He doubts it. But he knows this. His records are accurate. His ledgers are clean. His seals are in order. Tomorrow he will do it all again. And yet, as he lies in bed, a thought gnaws at him. What if the system is flawed? What if accuracy does not equal justice? What if survival means hiding, not declaring? But sleep overtakes him before the thought can settle. In a world ruled by ink and grain, is truth measured in honesty or in alignment with the expectations of the state? The rooster crows before the first lantern is lit. Outside the Ting, frost clings to the roof tiles. It is the 10th lunar month, and winter breathes down from the northern plains, cold and unrelenting. But Li Wei, senior tax scribe of the Jizhu commandery, is already awake, his fingers stiff from the chill as he grinds ink against stone by lamplight. He yawns once, quietly, then sets his brush in motion. Today is not an ordinary day in the ledger. Today, the imperial inspector is scheduled to arrive. The whisper of silk and authority. The inspector comes from the provincial capital on horseback, accompanied by 2 guards and a junior aide. His robes are finer, silk-stitched and trimmed in black. His seal is lacquered in vermilion. His gaze is slow and heavy, as if he carries not only scrolls but judgment itself. He is not here to make conversation. He is here to find discrepancies. And as every local administrator knows, the best tax record is the one with no surprises. Li Wei's morning review. Before the inspector enters the main hall, Li Wei completes a rapid review of the commandery's 3 master ledgers. The grain tax scroll, Tianfu Si. The labor quota record, Yao Yi Lu. The exemption registry, Mayan Fu Shu. Each entry is cross-checked. Names must be consistent across lists. Tax exemptions for flood or drought must be accompanied by a local magistrate's seal. Labor substitutions, when peasants send replacements instead of serving in person, must include full declarations and fees paid. Li Wei knows that a single missing tally, a single reversed character, could raise suspicion. Perfection is not rewarded, but error is punished. The audit begins. The inspector's aide unfurls a scroll of prepared queries, each derived from provincial data fed back from various Ting-level offices. These are the known red flag items entries that show fluctuation, contradiction, or unusual patterns. Line 202. 3 brothers listed with equal landholdings. This defies standard inheritance laws. Line 411. Widow Zhao listed as flood-exempt for 2 years running verify legitimacy. Line 67. Labor levy postponed 3 times explain. Li Wei answers each slowly, carefully, without emotion. The brothers agreed to equal partition against custom. Witnesses sign the record. Widow Zhao's field sits at the river's bend. Flood patterns were documented last season. The labor levy was postponed due to a reported outbreak of malaria. An herbalist attested to it. The inspector does not nod, he merely records. The problem of Widow Zhao. The case of Widow Zhao becomes a sticking point. The inspector demands physical proof. Her home is summoned for inspection. She is brought into the Ting courtyard, eyes downcast, her hands wringing a coarse cloth. She kneels on command, explaining her hardship, how her husband died in the flood, how her only son left for conscript service, how she has little to offer but a few hens and a prayer each night. Li Wei does not intervene. He is not allowed to. The inspector orders her exemption, revoked pending further investigation. Li Wei silently adjusts the register. His brush shakes a little as he makes the mark. There is no appeal, there is only compliance. Lunch in silence. The midday meal is provided to the visiting officials. Boiled barley, pickled mustard root, and slices of dried pork, served cold. The inspector eats slowly, without speaking. Li Wei eats after in another room, watching the dust drift through the beams of sunlight cutting across the floor. Outside, the villagers pretend not to look toward the Ting. They know that when men with silk belts arrive, someone always suffers. The mystery of the missing grain. In the afternoon, the inspection turns to grain storage. The tax grain is counted quarterly and stored in bamboo bins lined with oiled cloth to protect against rats and damp. The numbers do not match. 3 sacks of millet are missing. Not enough to be catastrophic, but enough to raise questions. The inspector raises an eyebrow. Li Wei feels his stomach twist. He had counted it just days ago. No sign of theft, no damage, no misrecording, at least not that he had seen. The scribes are questioned. Grandfather Liu insists he counted twice. Jin the runner says he hasn't been near the storehouse. Bao, the junior scribe, swears he sealed the door. No one is punished yet. But the inspector places a note in his scroll. Unexplained shortage, 3 sacks millet, reinspection scheduled. Li Wei knows what that means. This will follow him for months. Return to the numbers. After the inspector leaves without comment, without farewell, Li Wei returns to the scrolls. He checks the entries again. Every stroke of brush, every tied bamboo slip, every tally mark etched on bone or wood. It is meticulous, exhausting, hopelessly boring. And yet it is also sacred in a state that depends on hierarchy. Record-keeping is the thread that binds the system together. Without it, the hand bureaucracy would crumble. It is here that the empire lives, not just in soldiers and emperors, but in the quiet, unyielding scrutiny of grain and ink. Private frustration. That night, Li Wei writes a personal letter on silk paper, rare and expensive. It is not official correspondence. It is a reflection, one he may not send. Brother. The inspector has come and gone. He found errors, of course. There are always errors. Widow Zhao will likely lose her exemption. The grain has vanished. I do not know if this is incompetence or theft. I do not know if I care anymore. Some days I wonder if all we do here is copy numbers to please men who will never understand the land. But still I write, because to stop writing is to disappear. He does not sign it. He folds it, seals it with wax, and places it in the corner of his writing chest. Perhaps someday he will send it. Or perhaps he will simply keep it, like a secret ledger, a record of doubt. A cold wind and unfinished lines. Li Wei goes to sleep with the scrolls still open on his desk. He has to recalculate the village labor levy tomorrow. He needs to inspect the storeroom again. He must review the new tax exemption applications before the next lunar cycle. But tonight he rests. And as the wind whistles against the shuttered windows, he wonders. How many other scribes across the empire are writing the same lines, facing the same errors, making peace with the same silence? When the emperor issues decrees, who truly ensures they are followed, those who rule or those who record? The morning begins with a scratching sound. A brush dragged over bamboo, ink ground slowly on stone, the faint crack of joints stiff from hours hunched over records. Li Wei wakes not from dreams but from habit. There is no holiday for a tax official, not in the Han Dynasty, not in Jizhu Commandery, not even in the fatting autumn days of 97 BCE. When the seasons turn and grain dries in the fields, his work only intensifies. Because this is harvest registration season, the most important and most exhausting time of the year. And this year, more than most, the margins of survival are tight. The fields and the figures. Li Wei doesn't visit the fields himself, not anymore. His assistants do. They walk among the rows of dry stalks and count bushels, measure yields, and listen carefully for underreported harvests. The peasants know the system well. Report too little, and the state accuses you of fraud. Report too much, and your tax burden increases. So they report just enough, often with a bit of bribe hidden in the form of gifts, dried jujubes, small bolts of rough silk, or even a chicken left anonymously at the gate of the ting. Li Wei accepts none of it. He's not a moralist. He's simply afraid. He's seen what happens when officials are caught with unrecorded gifts. Even minor infractions can result in dismissal, flogging, or exile. Better to remain invisible. Better to keep the ledgers clean, even if reality is not. Updating the grain registers. The grain tax is calculated per mu of land, adjusted by an imperial average for expected yield. If a family fails to meet the quota, they must provide payment in coin, rare in the provinces, or labor, which most would rather avoid. Today, Li Wei has to update the land registers, making adjustments for flood damage along the riverbanks, a locust infestation in the southern hamlets, a plague that wiped out 2 entire households. Each line tells a story of hardship, of weather, of quiet resilience, but the scrolls don't make room for stories, only numbers. Family Huang, previous year's yield, 12 du, current 6 du, adjustment, 50% reduction. Family Shen, head deceased, sons conscripted, tax converted to labor draft. He writes without emotion, his face blank, his hands steady. The system and its shadows. Li Wei once believed in the imperial dream, that accurate records would lead to fair treatment, that transparent taxation would nourish the empire, that scribes like him were a vital part of an enlightened administration. That dream has faded. Now he sees what lies beneath the surface. Farmers falsify field sizes. Magistrates quietly shift surpluses to curry favor upstream. Fellow scribes trade exemptions for favors. And still the records are immaculate, clean, tidy, orderly. The scrolls are perfect. The reality is not. But the machine of empire cares only for scrolls. The investigation reopens. A messenger from the provincial office arrives midday. A parchment is unrolled and read aloud in the courtyard. The missing grain from 2 weeks ago, 3 sacks, still unaccounted for, is now the subject of a formal inquiry. Li Wei's stomach turns. He had hoped the matter would fade. But the inspector's note had made its way upward. Now, the office is under scrutiny. And worse, he is being held responsible. The hearing. Li Wei stands before the magistrate the next morning in a back room of the county yamen. No shackles, no soldiers, just 2 recorders and a senior official who does not look up from the table. 3 sacks sealed missing, no explanation. I do not believe the sacks were stolen, Li Wei says quietly. There was no damage to the storehouse. The locks were unbroken. Then where are they? Perhaps they were miscounted in the previous quarter. There is a long silence. The official scribbles a note. Li Wei is reprimanded, not dismissed. His salary docked for the season. He is officially warned. It is, all things considered, merciful. But it breaks something inside him. A letter never sent. That night he drafts another letter to his brother. His hand trembles. I think often of returning home. To live not as a scribe, but as a farmer, yes, even that. The scrolls are honest, the people are not. Or perhaps I have it backward. This is not a land of harmony. It is a land of calculation. And I fear I have spent too many years measuring others, and not enough years measuring myself. He burns the letter before dawn. Some things should never be read. The Ledger of the Forgotten. By the end of the week, Li Wei completes the autumn taxation record. It is wrapped in oiled cloth, sealed with a lacquered stamp, and handed to a courier who will carry it by boat to the prefectural office. Inside the roll, the names of 1,437 households. Yield tallies for 23 villages. Labor quotas, fulfilled and unfulfilled. Exemptions granted or revoked. Notes on locust damage, disease, and flood. It is a complete portrait of a region's economy. And yet it contains no faces. No deaths. No signs of fatigue or quiet acts of rebellion. It is clean. It is acceptable. It will become part of the state record. And in 10 years, no one will remember the name of the man who wrote it. The legacy of the brush. Li Wei retires 3 winters later, a quiet departure, no ceremony, no statue, just a simple note in the provincial registry, served 19 years, no significant infractions, work deemed sufficient. He leaves behind 3 chests of scrolls. A lifetime of records. A library of routine. A final thought. Hundreds of years later, fragments of hand tax records would be found in caves and tombs, bamboo slips bundled with string, still bearing ink marks from long-dead scribes. Historians marveled at the bureaucratic precision, at the scale, the uniformity. But no one remembered Li Wei, or Widow Zhao, or the 3 missing sacks of millet. Only the structure remained. Only the ink. Does immortality lie in the records we write, or in the silence that comes after? Story 3. Morning chores at a medieval monastery. It is dark when the bell rings. A long, sonorous toll that vibrates through the stone halls of the Abbey of St. Guthlac, nestled in the damp lowlands of Mercia, in what would one day be called England. It is the year 1043, and the world is ruled not by kings or armies, not here, but by ritual, silence, and the strict rhythm of the monastic hours. For Brother Alfric, the bell is not just a sound. It is command. It is awakening. It is the voice of Ora et Labora, the Benedictine motto that defines his life, pray and work. He opens his eyes, still crusted with sleep, and rises without complaint. because no one in the monastery complains. Not out loud. The hour of vigils. The first office of the day is vigils, the night prayer. It begins well before dawn, in a chapel cold enough to make the breath visible. The monks file in silently, woolen habits brushing the stone floor, wooden sandals tapping softly. There is no speaking, only the faint rustle of parchment, the distant hiss of candlelight, and the gravelly murmur of Latin psalms read from memory. Damen labia me apries, et os meum annunciabit laudum tuum. O Lord, open my lips, and my mouth will proclaim your praise. Ælfric kneels. The floor is cold. The prayer is familiar. Time passes, not in minutes but in recitations. The monks' quarters. After vigils comes a short return to the dormitory, a large stone chamber where each monk has a small cot and nothing more. No pillows, no fire, just a straw-stuffed mattress and a wooden chest, which may contain a copy of the Psalter, a worn pair of work gloves, a patched second habit. Ælfric sits briefly, staring at the single candle that marks his space. His fingers are chapped, his toes ache from the cold, but he does not think of comfort. He thinks of the tasks to come, the chores of the day, the quiet obedience expected of him. The rule of Saint Benedict. Every moment of Ælfric's life is shaped by a book written centuries before. The Rule of Saint Benedict, a set of 73 chapters outlining how a monastery should function, who speaks, who eats, how work is assigned, and when every prayer must occur. The rule is not a suggestion, it is law, it governs. The order of prayers. The type of manual labor permitted. How much bread and wine is allowed per day. What punishments are given for speaking out of turn. Ælfric knows it by heart. It is not just the structure of his day. It is the structure of his soul. Morning chores begin. At dawn, the bell rings again. This time it signals lauds, the second prayer of the day and the beginning of labor. Brother Ælfric's assignment this week is the kitchen garden, a small patch of earth behind the cloister wall where he tends leeks, cabbages, onions, a few medicinal herbs, sage, mint, yarrow. There is no speaking in the garden, only digging, weeding, watering. Tools are shared, movements are slow. The soil is hard with early frost and the winter crop is thin. But the monks cultivate not abundance, but sufficiency. And even when the work is dull, especially when the work is dull, it is done with reverence. Because labor is prayer. The silence of the refectory. At the third hour of the day, the monks gather in the refectory to break their fast. The meal is simple: barley bread, a thin pottage of turnips, a small piece of dried fish on feast days. They eat in absolute silence, while a single monk stands at a lectern, reading aloud from the lives of the saints or the letters of St. Paul. Ælfric chews slowly, without looking up. He listens as the reading continues. Be not slothful in business, fervent in spirit, serving the Lord. Romans 12:11. He feels the words settle into the quiet of the hall. No conversation. No laughter. Just the sound of spoons against wooden bowls and the cadence of scripture. The novice's task. After breakfast, Ælfric is tasked with guiding a novice, a boy no older than 12, who has been given by his family to the monastery in exchange for prayer and stability. The boy, named Edmund, struggles to keep his eyes down, his movements quiet. He asks questions not aloud, but with glances. He stumbles during psalm recitation. He forgets which tools go where in the shed. He lingers too long by the outer wall, staring at the fields beyond. Ælfric gently redirects him. There are no punishments today, only corrections. He remembers what it felt like to be new. To wonder if obedience was the same as devotion. To wonder if this life would ever stop feeling lonely. Copying the Psalms. In the afternoon, Alfric is summoned to the scriptorium, the writing chamber where sacred texts are copied by hand. His task is not to write, but to clean quills and prepare ink, a mixture of gall nuts, iron salts, and wine, carefully stirred and stored in glass vials. The master scribe, Brother Godric, leans over a parchment sheet, his fingers steady, his strokes deliberate. A single mistake means days of work are lost. Alfric watches in silence, learning not just letters but discipline. This is not art. It is worship by repetition. Vespers and the changing light. As the sun begins to set, the bell tolls for Vespers, the evening prayer. The chapel glows with amber candlelight, casting long shadows across the stone. The monks chant in unison, their voices low, slow, and strangely calming. The chant is not for show. There is no congregation, no applause. Only the monks, only the echo of devotion. Let my prayer be set forth before thee as incense, and the lifting up of my hands as the evening sacrifice. Psalm 141. Alfric does not remember when he first memorized it. He only knows that it brings peace. The last chore. After Vespers, each monk completes a final task. Alfric sweeps the floor of the chapter house, others clean tools, one trims the wicks of the chapel lamps. None of them speak. These are tasks done in silence, but never alone. Even in monotony, there is purpose. Night and the final bell. When darkness swallows the sky, the bell tolls for Compline, the final prayer. The monks gather one last time, chanting softly, kneeling together in dim light. After the final blessing, they retire to the dormitory. There is no fire, no conversation, only the sound of breath and the weight of discipline. Alfric lies awake a little longer than usual. He thinks of Edmund, of the Psalms, of the turnip patch that needs replanting, of the candle that burned too fast in the chapel. He does not think of the outside world. The monastery is the world. And sleep comes quietly. In the repetition of silence, is the soul strengthened or simply surrendered? The bell rings again before the sun touches the ground. Brother Alfric rises with the others, no faster, no slower. There is no race in this life, no need to hurry. The rule of Saint Benedict does not reward haste, it rewards steadiness. Outside, the cloistered walkways are slick with dew. The chapel bell continues to toll, marking the hour of matins, the night office that arrives just before dawn. The air smells of wax and old stone. Another day has begun. And in the Abbey of St. Guthlac, that means another cycle of silence, labor, and prayer. The endless rhythm. Life in a monastery is a circle. Not a line with beginning and end, but a wheel that turns over and over again. The monastic hours, matins, lauds, prime, terce, sext, nun, vespers, compline, anchor each day. In between are chores, lessons, meals, and manual work. There are no vacations, no weekends, only holy days which may include extra psalms or fasting. The brothers do not complain, or if they do it silently, with tighter movements or wearier sighs. For Brother Alfric, the comfort lies not in change, but in unchanging routine. Washing and the cellarium. This morning, Alfric is reassigned to the cellarium, the storage room where foodstuffs, tools, and supplies are kept. It is the domain of the cellarer, Brother Oswin, who is respected for his efficiency and his thick beard that seems to absorb the smell of barley and salt. The task is straightforward: cleaning empty jugs, counting measures of rye, noting which barrels of salted fish are nearing spoilage. But even this is sacred work. The rule says, "The cellarer shall regard all utensils and goods of the monastery as if they were sacred vessels of the altar." So Alfric counts every jar twice, handles each lid with care, and makes a mark in the wax tablet, noting that jar 47B has a cracked rim. The note may go unread for days. Still, he records it, because God sees even what the abbot does not. A moment of disobedience. After terce, as Alfric crosses the courtyard to the library, he notices novice Edmund lingering by the herb garden again. The boy is supposed to be shadowing Brother Matthew in the manuscript room, learning how to scrape parchment. But instead, he's staring at a snail. It crawls slow and slimy along the stone ledge. Edmund doesn't see Alfric at first. When he does, he startles, then bows his head. Alfric walks over, says nothing, looks down at the snail. Together, they watch it move for nearly a minute. Then Alfric says, in a low voice, "Even the slowest creature has a path." And he walks away. The manuscript room, the scriptorium, is the most revered space in the monastery after the chapel. Not because of gold or relics, but because of what is made there, books. Today, the scribes are copying a Latin homily, a sermon from the early church fathers. The quills are cut from goose feathers, soaked and trimmed precisely. Ink is black and thick. The parchment, made from calfskin, is expensive and smells faintly of lye. Brother Godric continues his life's work, a handwritten psalter for use in another abbey. He's been on the same manuscript for 7 months. Alfric's role is to prepare materials. He sorts parchment sheets, sharpens quills, illuminates small initials with red ink when permitted. It is delicate work. A single mistake means scraping the page, realigning the lines, and beginning again. And yet Alfric enjoys it, because in letters and lines he finds stillness. Midday prayers and fatigue. Bisects the midday prayer. The sun hangs directly overhead. The chapel is warmer now, but still drafty. Monks kneel again, chant again. O God, make speed to save us. O Lord, make haste to help us. Alfric's knees ache. He is not yet old, but the stone floor wears on bones. He wonders how Brother Oswin, now past 50, continues to kneel and rise so fluidly. He wonders if, in 10 years, he will feel the same. Meals and their meaning. Lunch is more substantial than breakfast, but still plain. A bean stew, rye bread, and cider watered down. They eat in silence. One brother reads aloud from the dialogues of Gregory the Great. He who labors well in the fields shall reap the kingdom. Alfric eats slowly, savors the warmth of the stew. Sometimes he wishes he could speak during meals. Not to gossip, but simply to say something like, "This is good," or "Did you see that hawk above the bell tower this morning?" But such talk belongs to the world outside the walls. And Alfric chose this life. The old walls and the young monk. In the afternoon, Alfric joins Brother Ivo in repairing a section of the cloister wall. A recent storm had loosened some stones. The wall must be strong not just for defense, but as a symbol of order. They mix mortar from sand and lime, reseat the stones. It's physical work and not elegant, but necessary. As they work, Edmund appears again, holding a bucket, offering to help. Brother Ivo waves him off. Alfric says, "Let him learn." The boy holds the bucket, watches intently, listens to instructions. No one speaks of sin, or theology, or doctrine. They just build a wall. Sometimes obedience begins in silence, but matures in action. The cloister garden. At dusk, Alfric tends the herb garden. He clips mint, gathers yarrow for tea, pulls weeds. He finds a sprig of lavender and pockets it. He'll leave it on the novice's bed tonight. No note, just a gesture. He does not know why. Perhaps it is because he sees in Edmund the quiet longing he once carried as a new brother. The question, will this ever feel like home? Evening approaches. The bell tolls again. Vespers. The long shadows stretch across the cloister walks. Alfric files in with the others, mouth already forming the first syllables of Psalm 119. Blessed are the undefiled in the way, who walk in the law of the Lord. His voice is quiet but steady. His mind is full but focused. He sings not for joy or praise or thanks. He sings because this is what monks do. Because in the daily acts of chores, walls, plants, and psalms, a life becomes whole. After the last bell, after Compline, Ælfric sits alone in the library. He is allowed an hour of private reading. He opens a worn copy of the life of Saint Anthony, the Egyptian hermit. He reads. He prayed often, worked with his hands, and lived alone, and in silence he became wise. He closes the book, looks up at the wooden beams, and wonders, was Saint Anthony ever bored? Did he ever miss conversation, laughter, noise? Or was the absence of sound the very presence of grace? He does not have an answer, but he returns the book to its shelf, extinguishes the candle, and walks back to the dormitory. Is discipline a cage we enter willingly, or the shape of freedom we were never taught to name? It begins with death. Before the sun has risen and before the bell for matins can ring, a low knock echoes down the stone corridor leading from the infirmary. Brother Oswin, the cellarer, has died in his sleep. There is no wailing, no shouting, no drama. Just a simple, solemn sentence whispered by the infirmarian to the abbot. He has gone. Death in the Rule. The Rule of Saint Benedict offers little sentiment on death. It acknowledges mortality not as a tragedy, but as a reality, one woven into the fabric of monastic life. The dead are to be buried quickly, quietly, and in community. The brothers will say all 150 psalms in his honor over the next 3 days. Work will continue. Prayers will continue. Because the monastery does not stop, not for joy, not for grief. The bell rings anyway. The bell tolls for matins. Its tone is no different than yesterday's. The chapel is colder this morning. The benches feel harder. The chanting is slower, more solemn, perhaps, but it does not falter. Brother Ælfric kneels with the others. He does not weep, he does not break rhythm. But as the words of Psalm 90 rise into the stone rafters, he listens differently. Thou turnest man to destruction, and sayest, Return, ye children of men. He repeats it, and feels the truth of it settle in his chest. The burial preparation. After lauds, Ælfric is assigned to help prepare Brother Oswin's body. There is no embalming, no procession, just simple rites. The body is washed by hand, wrapped in a woolen shroud. A wooden cross is placed on the chest. The grave is dug in the monastery cemetery, in a row already begun. The monks do not speak during this task. Only shovels against earth. Only breath fogging in the morning air. This too is labor. This too is prayer. The tools left behind. Later, Ælfric walks into the cellarium, where Brother Oswin worked for over 2 decades. Everything is in order. The salt barrels are sealed. The ledgers are complete. The oil jars are labeled in Oswin's neat script. His spare cowl hangs on a peg, still smelling of barley and beeswax. Ælfric picks up the inventory tablet, the last entry written just 3 days ago. 3 jars of salted herring removed for Lent preparation, all accounted for. He stares at the words for a long time. They are so ordinary, so exact. And now they are final. The novice's question. As Ælfric exits the storage room, Edmund finds him in the corridor. The boy is hesitant but brave. Why did he die? Ælfric pauses. No one had told Edmund, but of course he knew word passes silently, even among the silent. Because we are born to die, Ælfric replies. The boy doesn't look satisfied. Will we still pray today? Ælfric nods. We pray especially today. He places a hand on the boy's shoulder. The work continues. Reassignments. With Oswin gone, roles must shift. The abbot announces it at prime after the first reading. Alfric is to take over the cellarium for the season. It is not an honor nor a burden. It is simply what is needed. He accepts without comment and begins that very afternoon by recounting the barley. The evening meal. At supper, a portion of bread is set aside for Oswin's place at the table. No one sits there. It remains untouched. The reading that evening is from Ecclesiastes. For the wise, like the fool, will not be long remembered. The days have already come when both have been forgotten. Alfric chews his bread slowly. He wonders, will Brother Oswin be remembered? And then he realizes the answer is not found in memory. It is found in routine. In every jar labeled. In every tool left sharp. In every task passed on without complaint. The Psalms in the dark. That night after Compline, the monks gather again, this time for the vigil for the dead. They read through the Psalms aloud from the beginning. Their voices are quiet but steady. Psalm 1. Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly. Psalm 23. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Psalm 130. Out of the depths have I cried unto thee, O Lord. Alfric reads his assigned portion slowly, with care. He does not think of the words as metaphors. He thinks of Brother Oswin's tools, of the salt, of the unbroken rhythm, the return to mourning. The next day begins as usual. Matins, lauds, work, meal, chores. Edmund reports to the herb garden. Alfric measures out dried mint and restocks the oil lamps. The sun rises, and the bell tolls unchanged. The world beyond the walls. Once when Alfric was young, he had dreams of leaving the monastery, of traveling to Canterbury or York, or even across the sea to Rouen. But over the years, the idea of outside has softened, become distant. Now he finds his world within. The angle of the sunlight on the stone, the weight of a jug of barley, the rough grain of parchment, the shared silence of those who rise and kneel beside him. The world is not smaller. It is simply deeper. The lavender sprig. That evening, Alfric places another sprig of lavender on Edmund's cot. The boy doesn't mention it, but he sleeps more soundly that night. And for the first time, he wakes before the bell rings. A final reflection. Brother Oswin is buried with no inscription, no stone, just a wooden marker and a recorded line in the monastery chronicle. But his order, his routine, his care, they remain. They shape the cellar. They shape the chores. They shape the silence. And now they shape Alfric. In the monastery, death is not the end of work. It is simply a change in who continues it. Story 4. The Silent March of the Persian Couriers. Before sunrise, before the traders in Sardis lift their stall covers or the temple fires are lit in Susa, a hoofbeat echoes across the dry earth of the royal road. The sound is rhythmic, muted by dust, and utterly precise. The man astride the horse is Harpagos, a royal courier of the Achaemenid Empire. He does not speak, smile, or hesitate. His satchel carries no coin, no food, no personal belongings, only a sealed leather pouch bearing the king's mark. The inscription reads, "By the command of Darius, King of Kings." And that alone ensures his passage across 1,677 miles of imperial territory. This is not a tale of war or rebellion. This is the story of a man entrusted with messages. The road that stitched an empire. The royal road, commissioned by Darius I in the 5th century BCE, stretched from Sardis in Asia Minor, modern-day Turkey, to Susa in Elam, modern-day Iran. Through forests, deserts, and mountain passes, The road connected satrapies, capitals, temples, and fortresses. The empire was vast, the largest the world had ever seen, and communication was its nervous system. A message had to travel across multiple ecoregions, tribal territories, and linguistic zones, often faster than a merchant caravan could travel a fifth of the way. This is why the Angarum, the royal courier system, existed, and why men like Harpagos rose before dawn, ate dry figs and bread, and mounted horses bred for speed and endurance, not comfort. No one travels faster. Herodotus wrote of the Persian couriers. Neither snow, nor rain, nor heat, nor gloom of night stays these couriers from the swift completion of their appointed rounds. Long before it became a motto for postal workers, it described a network of discipline, not glory. The couriers weren't heroes, they weren't generals, they didn't conquer or legislate, but their loyalty was non-negotiable. Each courier was responsible for a stretch of the royal road, usually 20 to 30 miles. At each postal station, called a peridazish, he would hand off the message to the next man, or switch to a fresh horse and continue, depending on the urgency. A single message from Susa to Sardis could reach its destination in 7 to 9 days. A feat that, even today, would be hard to replicate on horseback. The silence of the saddle. Harpagos rides without speaking. He does not greet the herders passing with goats. He does not stop to eat unless the station allows it. His life is measured not in days, but in miles per shift, and in the time between dispatch and delivery. He carries a rod of passage, a short wooden baton bearing the seal of the king. With it, he can demand shelter, request fresh horses, be fed at way stations, pass through restricted zones, but he may not abuse these rights. Every act must serve the message. The station at Tyria. At the third station after departure, located near ancient Tyria, Harpagos stops briefly. The station is simple, a flat-roofed brick building, a corral, a water trough, and a covered rest area. Inside, another courier waits. They exchange only a nod. There is no change of courier here, just a change of horse. The station keeper brings out a Nicaean horse, famed for its long stride and durable legs. Harpagos checks the saddle, takes a drink of watered wine, and remounts. The sun is rising higher now. His shift will end soon, but he will not slacken. The empire does not reward early arrivals. It punishes late ones. The message itself. Harpagos has no idea what the message says. Couriers are not allowed to open or read dispatches. The leather satchels are sealed with clay, bearing the imperial cuneiform stamp. Breaking the seal without authorization is a capital offense. What could it be? A new decree on temple taxation. Orders to shift a border garrison in Bactria. A reprimand to a satrap slow in tribute payments. News of a noble's execution. The contents are not his to know. He is not a thinker. He is a conduit. And the less he knows, the safer the message. The dangers of the road. Despite the prestige of the courier system, it is not without danger. Bandits target those they mistake for merchants. Wolves roam the colder foothills in winter. Flooded crossings can delay a dispatch for hours. And worst of all, rivalries between satraps may result in obstruction. But Harpagos carries a satchel marked with the Faravahar, the imperial winged symbol. To interfere with a royal courier is to interfere with the will of Darius himself. Few are foolish enough to try. Still, he carries a small dagger, wrapped in linen beneath his robe. Not for battle, only for moments when messages must be protected to the death. The relay continues. By mid-afternoon, Harpagos reaches the 12th station. Here, his shift ends. He hands off the satchel to another courier, Orontes, a man from the region near Babylon, known for his precision. There is no conversation. Only a ritual. The seal is checked. The rod of passage is verified. The satchel is lifted carefully. A mark is made on a wax tablet, noting the time of arrival and handoff. Orontes mounts the next horse and rides away without a word. Harpagos exhales. His job is done for now. Tomorrow he will reverse the route. What happens after? The message will arrive in Susa by week's end. There, a scribe will open it in the presence of royal officials, translate it if needed, and log its contents into the imperial archive, a place of reeds, scrolls, and clay records. Sometime, a courier is summoned to explain delays or discrepancies. Sometimes the dispatch results in troop movements, edicts, or retribution. Sometimes it is simply acknowledged and stored. It doesn't matter. The courier's task is never about the result. It is about transmission. A day's end. That evening, Harpagos eats lentil stew in silence, resting his feet beside a clay brazier. He drinks water flavored with vinegar. He recites a prayer to Ahura Mazda, the wise lord, thanking him for strength, vision, and speed. There is no audience. No applause. Only the soft rustle of wind outside, and the faint hoofbeats of the next message rider, disappearing into the dusk. If empire is built by laws and armies, is it held together by the men who ride between them in silence? The road is never empty. Even when no footsteps fall and no hooves echo, the royal road still hums with purpose. Like the pulse of a sleeping giant, the dirt carries the memory of thousands of messengers, merchants, soldiers, and sages who have passed this way, each one leaving behind nothing but dust and direction. Today, Orontes, successor to Harpagos in the courier chain, rides the segment from Tyria to the next Peridasish, the royal relay station near Gordium. The scroll he carries is untouched, the leather satchel is sealed, its clay imprint crisp. He does not know the message. He does not need to. The road knows. Riding under the eye of the king. The couriers operate under the direct authority of Darius I, whose empire stretches from the Indus River to the Aegean Sea, from the steppes of Sogdiana to the Nile Delta. The king does not rule every corner by presence. He rules by information. Each day messages fly like arrows across the royal road: edicts, summons, tax reports, grain counts, birth records, death notices, temple inspections, military orders. A delay in a message might delay a harvest, a military campaign, or an execution. And so, Orontes rides as if the empire depends on his pace. Because in a way it does. Inside the way stations. Each way station along the royal road is built with uniform features. A guarded gate painted in black or ochre. A stable large enough for 10 horses. A rest chamber for couriers with stone benches and clay lamps. A record room containing wax tablets, styluses, and timing logs. A small shrine, usually for local deities or Ahura Mazda. These posts are manned not by soldiers, but by a special class of workers, the Angarapatas, the keepers of the post. They are responsible for keeping fresh horses ready, logging courier arrivals and departures, feeding and housing riders, preserving the neutrality of the post. No satrap, no local official, no tax collector is allowed to interfere with the way station. They answer to the great king alone. Horses and efficiency. The Nicaean breed, native to Media, dominates the courier network. These horses are prized for their broad chests, tall frames, endurance across terrain. Each courier leg is between 25 and 30 miles, short enough to maintain speed, long enough to cover distance with few interruptions. The horses are not treated gently, but they are not disposable. A lame horse can mean a failed delivery. Records show that horse replacements at the way stations were carefully tracked. Delays caused by inadequate horses were reported directly to the chief of roads in Persepolis. Orontes rides his mount with minimal gear, just a water flask, his rod of passage, a short knife, and the leather satchel across his chest. No personal possessions, no distractions. Only speed. The unseen geography. The journey crosses dry plains broken by tufts of wild grass, low hills that cast long shadows even at noon, the faint outline of a ruined city once sacked during Cyrus' early campaigns, small village outposts where people stop and stare, bow, and then vanish into their homes as the courier passes. But Orontes sees none of this. He sees mile markers, stone pillars placed at intervals, each one chiseled with a symbol indicating its number from Susa. They are worn but clear, and they remind him, you are not the first, you are not the last. The law of silence. The law is simple. Couriers do not speak unless spoken to by other couriers or station masters. Even the satraps must go through proper channels if they wish to question a rider. This silence is not born of arrogance. It is security. The roads are not entirely safe. Though few would dare, disguised spies, bandits, and informants have tried to intercept royal messages. The farther the empire expands, the more fragile its edges become. Silence protects not just the message but the system. To be a courier is to be invisible and unbreakable. Delays and the mark of shame. A courier who fails to deliver a message on time is subject to formal inquiry. Delays caused by weather, horse injury, or way station failure must be documented immediately at the next post. The station keeper writes a report. A tablet is sealed and sent separately to the road inspectors. Delays caused by negligence, personal detour, or unauthorized stops are punishable by demotion from courier rank, public flogging, in some rare cases, execution, especially if the message related to royal security. Orontes has ridden his segment 46 times before. He has never been late. He never intends to be. The message decoded, a rare glimpse. We do not know what exact message Orontes carries, but from recovered imperial archives and surviving administrative texts, we can reconstruct its likely form. A sample dispatch might read, to Artaphernes, satrap of Lydia, from the throne of Darius, king of kings. You shall send report of grain yield in the valley of Hermos. Taxes unpaid by city of Magnesia must be collected by new moon. Prepare roads for auditors from Susa. So commands the great king. Such a message, brief but heavy with implication, could realign local governance within days. The writer never knows what power they carry. They only know the weight of the pouch. The tombs along the road. Near the midpoint of his leg, Orontes passes a stone tomb carved into a cliffside. Its inscription is nearly faded, but the name remains. Courier Arispin, fallen in service to the king, may his message reach eternity. It is one of several such tombs placed quietly off the path. They are not grand, but they are honored. And Orontes, though he doesn't stop, touches the rod at his side, a small gesture of recognition. He will ride past this tomb again, many times, and one day, perhaps, be remembered like this himself. The road ahead. As the sun begins to tilt westward, Orontes crests a hill and sees the roof of the next Peridazish. A courier waits outside, arms crossed. Another relay begins. The message continues. He rides the final stretch, slows his horse, dismounts, and performs the ritual. Hand over the sealed satchel. Record the time of arrival. Report any observations, none. Rest the horse. Wait for the next shift assignment. What is carried? By the time the message reaches Susa, it will have passed through more than 90 hands. Not a single word will have changed. Not a single seal broken. No monuments will be built for these riders, no coins minted in their name. But they carried the empire. Quietly, efficiently, faithfully. When power spreads across mountains and rivers, who holds it together? The ruler or the rider? The torch flickers in the wind. It's past midnight now. The sky above Susa is heavy with clouds, and the mud-brick walls of the Imperial Archive hold the chill. Inside, a scribe named Mithridates adjusts the wick of an oil lamp and carefully breaks the clay seal on a leather dispatch pouch. He does not know the courier's name. He never will. He cares only for what the message says. Arrival in Susa. The courier last in a long chain had arrived hours earlier at the Apadana, the administrative heart of the empire. There was no fanfare, just the ritual. Present the rod of passage. Hand over the sealed satchel. Log the time, courier name and route segment. Depart without further contact. The pouch was then walked under guard to the Hall of Records, where scribes maintain the lifeblood of Darius's realm, documentation. The courier is likely asleep now in a stable bunk, or already preparing for a return route. His job is over. His message lives on. The scribe's duty. Mithridates is not a soldier, nor a noble, but he wears the scarlet-threaded belt of a senior scribe earned through decades of clear script, clean seals, and precise translations. The message, once unrolled, is written in Elamite, the bureaucratic language of the court. Its characters are sharp, aligned in uniform columns. He reads aloud to no one. To the satrap of Lydia. You will present your tribute in full measure by the feast of Mithra. Your grain ledgers will be inspected by auditors dispatched from Persepolis. You will cease all independent levies from temple lands. Signed and sealed, Darius, King of Kings of the great lineage of Achaemens. Mithridates nods. Another typical correction of autonomy. Satraps often overreach. The king corrects without sword, without march, but through paper, clay, and men on horseback. The archive beneath the palace. The message is copied 3 times. 1 copy remains in Susa. 1 is sent to Persepolis. 1 is stored in the imperial vault, the fireproof chamber carved into the rock beneath the palace. Inside the vault are scrolls, tablets, clay seals, and folded parchments from every corner of the Empire India, Egypt, Bactria, Lydia, Media, Babylon. Most bear the same marks. The winged disc of Ahura Mazda, the name of the king, and sometimes the faint, almost forgotten ink of a courier's number. Not a name, just a code. That is all the courier leaves behind. When things go wrong, not all messages arrive safely. Scribes occasionally record failed deliveries, marked with a red slash in the logbooks. Courier did not return. Message seal broken, invalid. Delay due to river flooding. Horse expired mid-route, dispatch rerouted. In extreme cases, missing couriers are investigated. Their last seen station is questioned. Sometimes a body is found. Sometimes nothing is ever recovered. But even in failure, the system adapts. New routes open. New riders ride. The road never sleeps. The anonymous empire. The glory of the Achaemenid Empire is carved in stone reliefs, palatial halls, and silver coinage bearing royal faces. But the empire's endurance, its daily function, rests in anonymity. The couriers are never remembered. Not in epics, not in statues, not in the grand oral tales of Persian nobility. But their tracks in the dust, their exact arrivals, and their sealed pouches built the invisible spine of administration. They did not command. They connected. The riders return. Elsewhere near Ecbatana, Harpagos, who began this chain 3 weeks ago, is preparing for another dispatch. He has cleaned his horse's hooves, sharpened his blade, inspected his rod of passage. Another sealed pouch awaits him in the relay station. He does not ask what it contains. He does not know where it ends. Only that he must carry it to the next man. With speed and with silence, he mounts without a word, and the dust begins to rise again. Legacy without story. Centuries later, long after Darius and Xerxes are gone, after Alexander has come and gone, and after empires rise and fall over the same road, archaeologists will dig through broken layers of dirt and stone. They will find remnants of way stations, bits of clay seal, fragmented satchels, horse bones buried beside rusted rods. And they will ask, who were these riders? But there will be no names, only signs, only paths that once held purpose. Final reflection. The couriers of the Persian Empire never conquered a city. They never spoke to kings. They never made laws. But they held a continent together, one hoofbeat at a time. When the names are forgotten, does the message still matter? Story 5. The Dusty Records of an Ottoman Archivist. It begins with a key. A rusted iron key, cool to the touch even in the warmth of a Constantinople spring morning. It turns slowly in the heavy lock of a reinforced oak door, behind which lies not treasure, but thousands upon thousands of scrolls, records, ledgers, decrees, and petitions, some centuries old, some only days. This is the imperial record chamber of the Topkapi Palace, circa 1571, in the 9th year of the reign of Sultan Selim II, son of Suleiman the Magnificent. And the man entering it, hunched but careful, with smudged fingertips and a linen cloth tucked in his sash, is Mustafa Effendi, senior archivist. His title means little outside these walls, but inside, he is keeper of memory, guardian of bureaucratic continuity, and the man who knows which shelf holds the copy of a land grant from 2 sultans ago, folded beneath a shipment manifest from Egypt, and beside a 30-year-old tax appeal written on oil-stained parchment. His job is not to change the empire. It is to remember it. The empire on paper. The Ottoman Empire, now in the zenith of its wealth and reach, is not merely ruled by janissaries or viziers, it is ruled by records. Everything is written. Land ownership, grain yields, births, deaths, marriages, military appointments, legal decisions, taxes paid or avoided, religious donations, artisan guild registries, royal decrees, firmans. The archive is the empire's memory, its legal shield and political weapon. Mustafa Effendi wakes each morning to sort that memory. The archivist's tools. Mustafa begins the day in silence. He dons a simple kaftan, brown with an ink-stained cuff, and enters the records chamber just as the mosque call to prayer fades into the morning air. He carries a brush for dust, a reed pen sharpened to a needle point, a small knife to scrape errors from parchment, a spool of thread for binding scrolls, a pot of ink thickened with gum Arabic, and most importantly, a mental index of the entire archive where every subject, satrapy, and subject people are stored. There are no shelves labeled with signs, only bundles marked with dates, Sultanic Tugra signatures, and short titles like Complaint from Konya Potters Guild, 1522. Ship Logs Rhodes Flotilla, 1566. Marden Land Disputes appealed to Imperial Court, 1504. Mustafa finds what is asked not through browsing, but by memory. The request arrives. Shortly after the morning tea has cooled, a messenger from the divan, the Imperial Council, arrives with a scroll sealed in wax. To the keeper of records. By the request of the Grand Vizier, Locate the record of the endowment made by Shahzad Mustafa in the year 954 AH, including attached Vakfi foundation deed. The copy must be presented at the next meeting of the Imperial Council, 2 days hence. This matter pertains to current debates regarding inheritance rights over the Waqf land in question. Mustafa bows. The wax seal is broken, the paper read again for accuracy, and then folded carefully into his robe. He knows the shelf, the bundle, the color of the twine that holds the records together. He does not need to think. He simply remembers. The Vakfi. The Vakfi, or foundation deed, is a type of legal document unique to the Islamic Ottoman world. It details how land or revenue is to be set aside permanently for a religious, educational, or charitable institution, usually a mosque, madrasa, or soup kitchen. These deeds are sacred, legally binding, and irreversible without high judicial authority. They often include full lineage of the donor, description of the property, intended use of revenue, list of managers and successors, invocations of divine reward, warnings against tampering. Mustafa finds the scroll wrapped in aged silk and places it on a wooden table under filtered light. He unrolls it gently. The ink is faded but intact, the calligraphy elegant, the gold border still faintly shimmering. He copies the text into a clean ledger, line by line. He writes not with speed, but with reverence. Because this, too, is sacred work. A life of margins. Mustafa's own life is not written in scrolls. He was born in Edirne, the son of a schoolteacher, sent to Medres religious school at 10, trained as a scribe by 16, entered service under the palace record master before the age of 20. Now at 50, he remembers more scrolls than people. He eats simply. He owns no horse. He walks home in the evening with ink on his hands and no words spoken all day. And still he feels satisfaction, because to preserve is to serve. The petition that was. That afternoon, Mustafa stumbles upon a peculiar bundle while searching through the defter records, tax registers of the Sanjak of Aleppo. A folded parchment, sealed but never opened. No markings, no reference, no catalog note. He opens it carefully. It is a petition from a spice merchant, dated 35 years prior, a complaint about unjust tariffs imposed by a corrupt local bey. It was never forwarded, never judged. It sat ignored among dust and silence. He pauses. Should he report it? Should he file it properly? He hesitates, and then quietly refolds it. He places it back. Some things are not meant to return. Tea and dust. By late afternoon, the archive is warm. Mustafa pours a small cup of say, bitter and dark, and sips slowly while cataloging the most recent copies submitted from the province of Rumelia. Road repair expenditures. Population counts of Christian villages. Logs of soldiers quartered in village homes. Complaint letters from local judges about stolen livestock. None of it is dramatic. None of it will make history books. But all of it keeps the empire upright. He logs each entry in the master register. He files it behind older scrolls. He dusts the shelf. He makes no error. The legacy of paper. The Ottomans are renowned for their architecture, their armies, their navy. But perhaps their greatest achievement is the archive itself, a labyrinth of law, memory, and administration. Through it the empire enforces taxes, settles inheritance, manages pilgrimage routes, validates property, limits corruption, remembers treaties, maintains loyalty through structure. Without it, even the Sultan's power becomes momentary. But with it, his word becomes eternal, etched in ink, protected by men like Mustafa. A closing ritual. As the sun sets behind the domes of Topkapi, Mustafa finishes rewrapping the Vakfii in its silk. He places it in a lacquered chest. He ties the chest shut with twine. He writes a short note in the index register, then closes the book. With both hands, he locks the archive door. And as the hallway darkens, he whispers habitually now, barely audible. Remember me not, but let the records speak. When memory is inked on parchment, who ensures it is never lost not kings, but the ones who sweep the dust? In the heart of Topkapi Palace, the archive does not sleep. Even as palace intrigue ripples beyond its walls, and janissaries bicker in the outer courts, even as foreign ambassadors dine under painted ceilings, and the Sultan lounges in velvet repose, the archive remains still. And inside it, Mustafa Effendi walks between shelves that sag under the weight of 5 centuries of empire. In here, time does not pass. It settles, like dust. The problem with preservation. The Ottoman Empire stretches across 3 continents, ruling over millions of people from wildly different cultures, languages, religions, and traditions. From the icy rivers of Bosnia to the dunes of Yemen, each province must obey one law, one system. But how is that enforced? Not with soldiers, not always. With paper. The lifeblood of the empire: Tahrir Defter's land surveys, canon names, law codes, Vakfii's charitable endowments, and court rulings flows from the provinces to Constantinople, carried by scribes, filed by archivists, and verified by trained bureaucrats. Mustafa's challenge is not creation. It is preservation. Fireproofing memory. The archives of Topkapi are designed with purpose. Even the architecture whispers bureaucracy. Thick stone walls insulate the rooms from the Istanbul heat. Small windows, high and narrow, reduce sun damage. Arched ceilings prevent moisture accumulation. Charcoal stoves are forbidden heat, must be brought in by covered metal pans. Water jars are placed at regular intervals, not for thirst, but for emergency dousing. Still, fire is always feared. More than war, more than treason. Because a war destroys cities. But a fire destroys memory. And once memory is gone, so is the claim to justice. A misplaced edict. One spring morning, a young scribe named Yahya bursts into the archive room. His feet are muddy, his turban askew. He's out of breath. Master Mustafa, have you seen the firman for the Anatolian copper mines? The one from Sultan Bayezid's reign? Mustafa looks up. That firman was issued over 80 years ago. It details the crown's rights to tax all copper extracted near Erzincan, a detail now relevant again due to a resurgence of smelting disputes. He nods. Without speaking, he walks to a far corner of the room. He opens a cedar chest. Beneath a book of maritime tariffs, beside a rolled deed from the Balkans, the scroll waits. Still sealed. Still intact. He hands it over. Yahya blinks. How did you know where it was? Mustafa just smiles, then returns to dusting. The scrolls no one reads. Not every document is important. Some scrolls are decades-old fishing rights, now obsolete. Others are marriage contracts of provincial governors long buried. Mustafa occasionally finds records that no one has opened in over a century. They're curled tight like sleeping animals, their ink faded to brown-gray, their parchment crackling like dry leaves. Yet he never discards them. To the outside world, they're irrelevant. But to an archivist, they are insurance. A land claim dismissed today might be revived by a rebellious son tomorrow. A border drawn and forgotten could become the cause of a war. And when the past is needed, it must be ready, not buried, not guessed. Ready. The illiterate Sultan. Selim II, the current sultan, is known privately among the court to have no interest in reading. Unlike his father, Suleiman the Magnificent, who composed poetry and issued law codes personally, Selim delegates entirely. His world is wine, gardens, and concubines. But he still signs firmans, still stamps the imperial tugra, still expects every order followed to the letter. The paradox is not lost on Mustafa. A man who cannot read commands a system based entirely on reading. Yet it works because others do read. Scribes, clerks, viziers, judges, archivists. Without them, the Sultan's ink means nothing. The secret shelf. Tucked deep behind a false panel in the archive lies what Mustafa calls the whisper shelf. These are documents never meant to circulate. Records of execution orders for noblemen. Reports of sultanic dreams interpreted by mystics. Internal complaints against viziers. Edicts reversed before implementation. Orders related to political disappearances. Mustafa did not create this shelf. He inherited it. And one day, he will pass it on with a whispered list of what it contains and who must never see it. Because even in a world of parchment, secrecy survives. Scribal apprenticeship. Mustafa mentors 3 apprentices. Yahya the eager one, quick with numbers but sloppy with ink. Halim, rare among women for her role, trained in cataloging vakfiais. Tahir, quiet, with a perfect memory and a habit of asking uncomfortable questions. They are the future of the archive. He teaches them not only how to copy without error, but how to think archivally. What belongs together? What must never be shelved nearby? What needs extra copies? What should be buried metaphorically in bureaucracy? He warns the empire forgets, you must not. They nod, though they do not yet understand. They will. Of rats in mold. Some dangers are less dramatic than fire or theft. Mustafa battles. Silverfish, which eat parchment edges. Mold spores, which stain and weaken ink. Mice, drawn by the starch used in binding glue. Moisture, which warps paper and leads to curling. He developed systems. Lavender sachets to deter insects. Lime powder to control humidity. Boxes lined with copper mesh. Regular inspection rotations every fortnight. The work is not glorious. But when a scroll survives a century, it is because of boring precautions, not miracles. A letter from Cairo. One evening, a courier from the docks brings a sealed packet from Cairo, a complaint from the Muezzin Guild regarding taxation on call-to-prayer towers. It is dated 7 months earlier. The delay is noted. Still, it must be entered into the archive. Mustafa unwraps it, reads it aloud softly, records its presence, then files it beside religious guilds. Egypt, 1550-1575. He wonders if anyone will ever read it again. He doubts it, but he files it anyway. Because it was written, and what is written must be kept. A quiet end to the day. As lamps are extinguished and the echo of footsteps fades from the marbled halls of Topkapi, Mustafa writes his daily summary in the archivist's log. 1 vakfii located, 1 firman retrieved, 11 new entries copied. Rats deterred, mold monitored. Apprentice Halim filed Egypt papers. Memory is safe today. He blots the ink. He exhales. He closes the log. And with that, the empire continues not with war or conquest, but with memory filed in silence. What happens to an empire if its memory is misfiled, not erased, just slightly misplaced? The pages that survive the longest are often the ones no one ever reads. That's what Mustafa Effendi has come to believe, now in the twilight of his years. His beard has thinned, his hands tremble slightly, but his mind remains razor-sharp. Each parchment scroll, each stitched leather-bound register, each bundle of fragile petitions. They live inside him like an inner city. The Ottoman Empire still stands powerful in appearance. The Sultan still reigns. But in the archive, something else is always occurring, a slow erosion of remembrance. Dust as a kind of time. Dust covers everything. No matter how often it is swept, it returns. A fine gray patina settles over inked paper and stamped seals. For Mustafa, it is no longer a nuisance. It is a measure. A document untouched for 3 years will show one tone of dust. A decade, another. 50 years nearly indistinguishable from the parchment itself. Some ledgers are dusted every month. Tribute accounts, land surveys, court decrees still cited by the divan. Others not in generations. Some bundles lie in such stillness that when Mustafa lifts them, the leather binding creaks like old wood and the air smells of time. He does not disturb them unless asked. But he remembers them. Requests from the living. Occasionally, a traveler or merchant, someone from the outside, will make an appeal to view a record. An Armenian cloth dealer comes, asking for proof of a tax exemption granted to his grandfather. A Greek monk with trembling hands requests a copy of a monastery's land deed. A Kurdish chieftain's nephew asks for clarification on old border lines. Each time Mustafa searches. Sometimes he finds the requested item. Sometimes he finds something adjacent, a forgotten petition, a counterclaim, a record of corruption. Sometimes he finds nothing. But always he writes down the request. Because someday the same question may be asked again. The missing shelf. One winter, during a roof repair, a workman accidentally knocks loose a wooden panel high on the west wall of the archive. Behind it, a narrow cavity, no wider than a man's shoulders. Inside, one shelf. 40 scrolls. None catalogued, no known entries, no records of their existence. Mustafa retrieves them one by one. The writing is elegant, the seals genuine. They are land grants from over a century ago, awarded to minor nobles during a war that few remember. Some of the names have since been erased from official rolls. Some villages no longer exist. But the documents are legal, binding, alive in a way. He does not report this finding. Instead, he creates a new entry in the index. Shelf name, Mutfak, the Turkish word for kitchen, a private joke, because these records, hidden near an old chimney shaft, had been baking quietly for decades. What memory requires. Archiving is not about nostalgia. It's not even about truth. It is about proof. A man may lie about a debt, but a signature on a ledger, logged and preserved, tells another story. A local judge may deny wrongdoing, but if his letter of complaint was filed twice, once with edits, what does that suggest? Mustafa has seen men rise and fall based not on speeches or swords, but on folded pages retrieved from the shelf at the right moment. It is not glorious. It is bureaucratic justice. And it is only possible because someone remembered to keep the paper. Apprentice rebellion. Tahir, the quietest of Mustafa's 3 apprentices, becomes increasingly curious about documents that never leave the archive. Why do we keep things that no one uses? Isn't it wasteful? What if the empire ends? Will anyone care for this paper? Mustafa offers no grand reply. Only a question. Did you ever forget a promise you made when you were a child? Tahir nods. Mustafa says, now imagine if someone had written it down. Would that make it more real? Tahir doesn't answer, but the next morning he's at his desk earlier than usual, copying a grain ledger, dusting a forgotten register. Something has settled in him, as dust settles on pages. When empires shift, the news spreads slowly in whispers. A battle lost in Hungary, a rebellion near Damascus, tensions with the Venetians. Nothing catastrophic, not yet. But the archive receives new orders. Copy all land records from the western provinces. Review court judgments involving Christians and Jews. Prepare to dispatch duplicate Vakfi records to Konya and Aleppo. These are the signs of imperial anxiety. When documents begin to move, the court is unsure of its memory. Mustafa prepares the scrolls without comment. It is not his place to worry, it is his place to remember. The day the fire came close. A fire breaks out in the harem kitchens, 2 courtyards away. Smoke lingers over Topkapi for days. Mustafa stands at the threshold of the archive during the worst of it, holding a key in one hand and a basin of water in the other. The fire never reaches the archive. But it could have. And Mustafa does not sleep that night. Instead, he rereads the first scroll he ever filed, a minor tax complaint from a village whose name he's forgotten. He runs his fingers over the faded ink, then returns it to its place. What the archive cannot hold. Not everything is written. There are no records of the whispered arguments between viziers, the terror of peasants facing new taxes, the personal regrets of a corrupt judge, the silent decisions of eunuchs in the palace halls, the hunger in a child's eyes during a census count. These are unwritten histories. Mustafa sometimes wonders, what is forgotten not because it was erased, but because it was never recorded? No archive holds pain, only proof. A final log. Years later, Mustafa's hand is slower. He lets Yahya and Halim manage daily filing. Tahir now oversees the catalog index. But each week, Mustafa writes in the old archivist's logbook. Today it reads, the record from Mardin was recovered. The Hungarian troop logs were copied and bound. A visitor asked about a well built by her great-grandfather. I found the Vakfi, it still smells of cinnamon. Memory remains. He dots the last line, then closes the book. It may be his final entry. Epilogue centuries later. In the 20th century, as the Ottoman Empire fades into history and the Turkish Republic rises, scholars find the Başbakanlık Osmanlı Arşivi Ottoman archives remarkably intact. Ledgers from centuries ago. Land grants still legible. Tax records for villages long erased from maps. No one knows the names of the archivists who preserved them. But their work endures. They held the memory of an empire that often forgot itself. If memory is power, what becomes of the powerful who forget? Story 6. The Watchmakers of Ming Beijing. You wouldn't expect to find ticking in the Forbidden City. Not in the sprawling stone courtyards, nor in the silent elegance of the Hall of Supreme Harmony. Not under the watchful eyes of eunuchs, or behind the painted screens where concubines whisper through silk. And yet there is ticking. Tiny rhythmic sounds, clicks and whirs, the ghost-like hum of cogs, springs, escapements. Here, in a side chamber far from court politics and celestial rituals, the emperor's horological workshop quietly defies time by attempting to master it. It is 1582, the 10th year of the Wanli emperor's reign. The Ming dynasty still stands tall, but cracks have begun to form in its imperial armor. Political stagnation, court intrigues, and a bureaucracy that grows more tangled by the year. But inside a narrow building to the northwest of the Forbidden City's inner sanctum, a group of Chinese artisans work with tools imported from far away. Swiss files, Flemish bell casings, Portuguese tin, and Jesuit blueprints. They are watchmakers, and their task is not survival or conquest or spiritual enlightenment. Their task is to measure time. Time before time. Before the arrival of mechanical clocks, time in China had a different texture, more flowing than segmented. For thousands of years, water clocks and armillary spheres served the calendar needs of emperors. Time was recorded in double hours, aligned with celestial movements. It wasn't minutes and seconds that mattered, it was cycles, seasons, and omens. Time in traditional Confucian cosmology was an element to be harmonized, not carved into pieces. But that began to change when Jesuit missionaries arrived, bringing with them knowledge of Western astronomy and along with it, their own devices of precision. The Jesuits wanted favor at court. The Chinese emperor wanted to understand the heavens more precisely. And so, for a few brief decades, the tick of the mechanical clock became a new kind of power. The workshop of quiet minds. In this dim room near the palace of earthly tranquility, 5 men work by lamplight. They are imperial artisans, hand-picked from the Ministry of Rites, their identities largely unknown to history. One is Chen Bo, the senior technician. He's in his 50s, hair graying, fingers steady despite mild tremors from years of labor. He rarely speaks, except to correct a measurement. Next is Liang, a younger man with exceptional eyesight. His talent is filing gear teeth to near-microscopic tolerance. He can spot misalignment by the way a wheel reflects lamplight. There's Wang, who specializes in miniature bells and chimes. Then 2 apprentices, one mute, one always humming. They speak in murmurs, nods, and the language of tools. The room smells of oil, brass, and soot. No one here seeks status, only accuracy. Tools from afar. Most tools in the workshop are foreign, imported by Portuguese traders and carried inland by camel, mule, and eventually sedan chair. Among the instruments, calipers, far more precise than anything made in local smithies. Spring steel cut to Western measurements. Blueprints written in Latin, with annotations in half-learned Chinese characters. Clock faces marked with numerals unknown to traditional Chinese artisans. And yet they adapt. Chen Bo has hand-drawn dozens of diagrams in his own logbooks, slowly translating Western gear ratios into cosmic harmony charts, matching planetary positions with tooth spacing. He does not understand all of the science, but he understands the mechanics. The Imperial Commission. A eunuch arrives late one evening, gliding into the room without a sound, his presence acknowledged only by the faint tap of his wooden slippers on stone. He carries an edict. By order of His Majesty, the artisans are to construct a clock that rings each hour of the day and night, aligned with the astrological calendar for the coming dragon year. It must include celestial movements for Venus and Mars, and a music box that plays a court melody every 6th hour. They bow in silence. No negotiation, no delay. The clock must be delivered within 100 days. Chen Bo sighs and sets his oil lamp closer. Work begins anew. Gears and ghosts. The next weeks blur into one another. Gears are filed, springs wound and unwound, errors corrected, recorrected, bell tones tested and retuned. Every 12 hours, an apprentice walks to the observatory tower to verify star positions, comparing planetary alignments with the mechanical model. There is little rest. At one point, Liang burns his hand on a spring coiled too tightly. Chen Bo bandages it without comment. They measure time in ticks and failures. No voices raised, no praise given. Only tiny movements, like ghosts in brass. A dream from the West. Chen Bo dreams of a man he has never met, Tycho Brahe, the Danish astronomer whose name appears in the margins of Jesuit manuscripts. In the dream, Tycho gestures to a broken gear and whispers, "Time is not a thing, it is a language." Chen Bo wakes with the phrase echoing in his ears. He writes it in a margin of his own notebook, in Mandarin. Chinese letter, 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 Chinese letter. He doesn't fully understand, but it feels true. A visit from the astronomer. One afternoon, a Jesuit astronomer, Father Matteo Ricci, visits the workshop. He is quiet, polite, observant, speaks fluent Chinese. He inspects the current clock under construction and nods in approval. He leaves behind a small gift, a Swiss-made escapement gear, smoother and more refined than anything they could make locally. Chen Bo accepts it with bowed head. They do not speak again. But the gear becomes the heart of the new clock. The deadline approaches. Day 97. The clock is assembled, tall, ornate, carved from sandalwood, inlaid with jade. A bronze dome houses the celestial model. It ticks. It sings. It chimes on the hour. It predicts Venus's retrograde motion to within half a degree. It is beautiful. And none of the artisans take credit. The eunuchs will deliver it. The emperor will receive it. The astronomers will marvel. Chen Bo simply writes in his log. Complete, delivered. Maintains plus or minus 4 seconds error per day. Acceptable. Forgotten again. Weeks pass. No reward arrives. No message. No imperial recognition. Just another commission. Another edict. This time the clock must be smaller, portable, capable of fitting inside a lacquered case. Chen Bo sets down his cup of bitter tea, opens a fresh scroll and begins anew. He never asks why. Because that is the life of the watchmaker. To chase seconds in a court obsessed with eternity. When time is broken into fragments, what happens to the people who keep gluing it back together? There's a saying among the court eunuchs of the Forbidden City. The sun rises for the emperor, but the ticks serve the Jesuits. It's meant as a joke, dry, whispered behind lacquered fans, but like many things at court, it carries a hidden truth. By 1583, as Emperor Wanli's ministers grow more aloof and the bureaucracy sags under its own rituals, the Jesuits' clocks continue to tick, silent instruments of influence. And at the heart of this strange fusion of European mechanism and Chinese mandate, the watchmakers work on. They're not diplomats, not theologians, not spies. But what they build may last longer than any sermon or treaty. When the missionaries came, in 1582, Matteo Ricci arrived in Macau, the Portuguese enclave on China's southern coast. With him came not only a plan to evangelize, but a strategy. Offer knowledge, not conversion. Earn favor through science. And nothing fascinated the Chinese elite more than precision. Astronomy, mathematics, cartography, and clocks. To a Confucian court where time was dictated by celestial balance, the Western clock offered something blasphemously seductive: predictable time. Not seasonal, not spiritual, just mechanical. That was a powerful form of control. Chen Bo's new assignment. The second commission arrives during the third lunar month of 1583. This one is unlike the others. A portable clock to be used by the director of rites during official court ceremonies. It must ring on the quarter hour, keep accuracy within 5 seconds per day, and include visual markers for the 5 phases: wood, fire, earth, metal, water. Chen Bo narrows his eyes. To marry the Western mechanics of minutes and seconds with the Eastern cosmology of elemental time is absurd, but not impossible. He nods and begins sketching. Time as ritual. In Ming China, time is sacred. Every royal act is timed to an auspicious hour. Edicts are signed under a specific lunar phase. Marriages arranged by alignment of elemental energies. Executions timed with planetary crossings. But Western clocks don't care about omens. They tick regardless of stars. This contradiction causes quiet confusion in the court. Are these clocks sacrilegious? Or proof of heaven's hidden design? The watchmakers don't answer. They just file gears. The Jesuit blueprint. Father Rixai returns one morning with a gift, a blueprint for a French balance spring mechanism, recently acquired through Portuguese traders. It offers unparalleled timekeeping. Rixai explains its principles. Chen Bo listens, then asks a single question. And what happens when the spring breaks? Rixai shrugs. You rebuild. It's not the answer of a philosopher, but it is one a watchmaker understands. So they begin again. New tools, new casing, new mathematics. Liang, the young gearsmith, mutters about the spring's fragility. Chen Bo quietly drafts a backup system. The court watches. Word of the workshop spreads. Not widely, but enough. One morning, a court official named Minister Zhao visits unannounced. He wears white gloves and carries an ivory-handled fan. He examines the clocks. He says little. Then quietly, "We never had these clocks before the missionaries." Chen Bo nods. "We had time, but not like this." Zhao raises an eyebrow. "Do they tell the truth, or just what we want to hear?" Chen Bo considers this. "They tell what we measure, not what we believe." Zhao leaves without another word. Calibration and memory. Every morning before sunrise, Liang and the mute apprentice compare their clocks to the astronomical tower's readings. They carry the timepieces in silk-lined boxes, walking through quiet courtyards lit by paper lanterns. Once atop the tower, they set their instruments beside celestial globes, matching ticks to star paths. They make adjustments of fractions of seconds. Chen Bo records these with obsessive precision. He now has 27 logs, each cataloging error margins, spring tensions, and humidity effects. He doesn't trust memory, only measured deviation. Music for the hours. Wang the chimesmith has a problem. The director of rites has requested that the portable clock play a different melody for each of the 5 phases. But Chinese court melodies are pentatonic. They don't translate well to the Western-tuned bells. After nights of trial, he finds a compromise. Wood, a soft bamboo tone, imitated with hollow brass. Fire, a rising trill, slightly sharp, mimicking flicker. Earth, a low, steady drone. Metal, pure bell chime clipped. Water, a descending melody, fluid and slow. The melodies last no more than 3 seconds. But they echo in the hall long after the clock has moved on. Rumors of treachery. One evening, a eunuch whispers that some in the court suspect the clocks of being tools for foreign influence. They do not run on qi, one Confucian scholar mutters. They are soulless. Chen Bo hears this and says nothing. But that night he writes in his log. A clock has no spirit, but it remembers better than most men. Submission to the court. On the 100th day, the new clock is ready. Polished jade casing, brass inlays, a dial with both Roman numerals and Chinese characters, the 5 phases arranged around the face, tiny glass indicators marking the current elemental hour. A small bronze door opens every 6 hours to reveal a carved phoenix turning slowly to music. The eunuchs are pleased. The director of rites is amused. No one thanks the artisans. But the clock is placed in the hall of celestial balance. Chen Bo nods once and begins another project. When time is borrowed from other civilizations, does it ever truly belong to the one that uses it? The first clock in the Forbidden City stopped at 3:17 a.m. during a quiet autumn storm in the 19th year of the Wanli Emperor's reign. No one noticed until well into the afternoon. And even then, it was not a court official or a palace eunuch who discovered the failure. It was Liang, the young gearsmith, now no longer an apprentice. He had come early to oil the bearings. The air was thick with rain, and condensation had formed on the clock's lacquered body. When he turned the key, there was no resistance. The mainspring had snapped, and with it the illusion of perfect timekeeping. The decay of precision. Clocks, for all their majesty, are fragile. Humidity warps gears. Dust gums the teeth. A single rust spot can seize a movement. In the Forbidden City, where ritual is eternal and objects are sacred, maintenance is secondary. Once the court adopts a mechanical device, it becomes a symbol, not a tool. Which is why, when a second clock falters this time, one gifted by the Jesuits to a prince, rumors spread that foreign time is failing. A Confucian official writes a brief essay. Let not the court depend on machines that require foreign hands to keep them breathing. The artisans feel the pressure mount, but they keep working. Chen Bo's final design. In his 60th year, Chen Bo is tasked with his final commission, a tower clock to be installed in the Pavilion of Literary Profundity. It is to show imperial time, solar time, and star time all at once. 3 dials, 1 mechanism. He accepts without complaint, but his hands are slower now. He spends hours staring at blank parchment, imagining how to balance the rotation of brass with the weight of philosophy. After a week, he decides on a central idea. 1 truth, 3 faces. He designs a main movement with 3 outputs, each using differently calibrated escapements. It's ambitious, nearly impossible. But he begins. A visit from the Jesuit. Father Rixey returns once more, older, slower, deeply respected by the court now. He inspects the incomplete design, nods, then sits beside Chen Bo. They share tea. Time in the West is linear, Rixey muses. Time in China is cyclical. Chen Bo chuckles softly. And yet our clocks look the same. They sit in silence. Later, Rixey leaves a parting gift, a brass fusee chain, a European invention meant to equalize power from a mainspring. It's delicate, almost impossible to replicate in China. Chen Bo places it in a small drawer. He may never use it, but he respects the gesture. The death of a gearsmith. Liang falls ill during a particularly hot summer. What begins as a fever becomes coughing, then delirium. He dies before the seasonal rains arrive. Chen Bo says little, but in his journal he writes, Liang gearmaker, he aligned time. The workshop feels emptier. Wang, the chimesmith, begins teaching the mute apprentice to work the brass lathe. The younger artisans are capable, but they don't yet understand the silence between ticks, the spaces where time hesitates, forgets, reflects. Chen Bo begins to prepare his final logbook. The clock tower rises. After 2 years, the tower clock is finished. It has 3 dials. The first shows Western hours and minutes. The second shows the Chinese double-hour system. The third, a complex gear-driven chart of planetary motion, rotates once every 365.25 days. The music chime plays a single note every hour, a low C, tuned to the tone used in ancient court rituals. It is understated, precise, quiet. When it is installed, the emperor offers no grand statement. But Chen Bo, watching from a distance, feels a strange fullness. He has measured time and left none of his own behind. After the ticks fade, years pass. Dynasties shift. The Ming gives way to the Qing. The Forbidden City changes rulers. Foreign diplomats arrive. New inventions follow: steamships, telegraphs, electric lights. And the clocks. Some break, some are dismantled, some are melted for parts during rebellions. But a few remain. In dusty corners, inside chambers, and in museums centuries later. 1 clock with 3 dials, marked with symbols both Eastern and Western, is displayed behind glass in Beijing. No one knows the name of its maker. But on its brass casing, under the dial for star time, a single line is etched in old calligraphy. One truth, three faces. Legacy in motion. Historians debate the impact of these early watchmakers. Some say they were technicians, nothing more. Others believe they represented a rare moment where China and the West met not in conflict, but in curiosity, where philosophy didn't just translate into words, but into wheels and balance springs. Their names are forgotten, their clocks mostly silent, but the idea of precision, of honoring each second, continued long after their tools were put away. Time had changed China, and China for a moment had changed time. When a clock stops ticking, what remains? The silence or the shape it gave to motion?